Hi everyone, it's Yvette Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today in this online audio and video space and with our very special guest who is Amy Johnson. She is a psychologist, coach, author, and speaker who shares a groundbreaking new approach that helps people find true lasting freedom from unwanted habits via insight rather than willpower. She is the author of Being Human and the Little Book of Big Change, the No-Willpower approach to breaking any habit. And also she is opened, which I love, an online school, which is the Little School of Big Change, which helps hundreds of people find freedom from anxiety and habits and live a more peaceful life. And she's also regularly featured as an expert on the Steve Harvey Show and Oprah.com. And I'm super grateful and honored to be here with our very special guest, Dr. Amy Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's incredible. Thank you for sharing today your work, your books, the Little School of Big Change. But before we dive into all of that, are you happy to let our audience know a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to actually want to get into psychology?
Sure. Well, I live here in the United States. I was born and raised here, and I always was curious about how people worked, like why we did the things we did. I can remember being really young and watching my parents worry about things like money and work and things like that and fight with each other and just think like life is, as a little kid, I was thinking like, life is so fun. Like, why do big people worry so much? And honestly, that's so innocent, and I can look back and remember that, but it really was a driver for everything that I study and share today, because that little kid in me knew there's no way it has to be this hard and stressful. And I wanted to know why we seem to grow up and get all worried and in our heads all the time. And that's exactly what I do today. So
Yeah, so it stemmed from just growing up. So your parents obviously naturally were stresses, like worried obviously financially about paying bills,
yeah.
and you felt that anxiety and wondered why. Wow. And then when you decided to study, like that must have been such so much involved in the studying to become the psychologist, but you loved that whole process of learning, and you still love the whole learning process, don't you, as a professional?
I love it so much. I mean, I've never quit being curious about how we work. In fact, the more I see about it, the more I kind of realize that I don't know, and the more curious I am. There's no end to this. And it's interesting because I studying psychology in school is very kind of traditional, like traditional mental health really looks at things in sort of a different way than I do today. So, anxiety looks like a diagnosis and a problem, and it looks important and personal and like something we need to treat. I know it creates, issues for people, no question. It's not that it's not important or that we don't have to pay attention to it, but it looks different to me today. It looks like we all feel stressed at times. We all feel anxious. We all worry. We all try to comfort ourselves. And when we can just understand that, we see that it's not this big, horrible, serious thing. It's just very human. So much of what I studied, yes, it had this kind of heavy mental illness bent to it. And I loved every minute of it, but I also in the process was kind of waking up to like, I don't think we're that broken. Like I don't think
Mm.
that's such bad news. Because I could remember again being a little kid and thinking like, hey, life's easy when you don't think so much, when you're just a kid. I just knew there was something in that.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And I think the pandemic globally has really, I think, raised awareness that we all experience worry, anxiety, overthinking, and what I feel we're openly talking about it more, instead of like it hasn't been labeled mental illness as such. Like we're openly talking about, I'm really anxious because I'm in lockdown, or because I'm worried about my mom and aged care, and people are being really open about anxiety. Would you say you felt during, obviously, the global pandemic that anxiety has been really heightened? I mean, you work in the industry and you're based in America, but do you feel really hopeful that we can learn techniques or tools or things to break the excessive worrying?
Yeah, I think for sure. What's happened is like especially initially, everything was just uncertain, which is probably the hardest state for a human to be in. One of pure uncertainty. I mean, if you remember, like this time last year, last March, last April, I mean, now we've gotten used to things and all of that. But like initially, it was like, what? Like I canceled 10 flights in a day. Like my kids came home from school indefinitely. It was like, what is happening? And that's really, really hard for a mind. It's not hard for a human. Now, so I kind of separate who we really are and how our mind works. We're incredibly resilient. I was still just laughing at jokes and being with my family and doing my life when all that was happening, but my mind was a mess, and everyone's mind was a mess for the most part, because our mind is just this computer that wants to figure it out, wants to know what's coming and who am I and what's going to happen and what already happened. It's like past, future, past, future. That's how our mind works. So when all of a sudden our future is completely up for grabs and we don't really even understand what's happening yet, it throws a mind into a tailspin. So yes, I think minds everywhere were a mess. And then, I mean, so much happened. Like people were dealing with, like you said, parents that we were worried about, and friends and family being sick, and worried about our own health and finances and all of it. And all of that uncertainty just gives a mind so much to grab onto and spin around in. And that's what worry is, and anxiety. So, yes, there were real things happening, but separate from that was our worry and anxiety. And I know it sounds weird to say it's separate because we were thinking about life and the pandemic, but the way each of us, kind of the way our mind has to figure things out and the stories it tells, those aren't about life so much. Like the content is about life, but really it's a mind trying to just figure things out and worrying about things all the time. So
Yeah.
there was a
Uh,
lot of that. Yes.
yeah, I know my anxiety went through the roof. And from the smallest things of just going to the grocery store and then touching, like, self serving myself,
Yeah.
and then conscious, like, oh, this is a contagious touch sort of virus. And just the smallest things, oh, we're shut down. And what does this mean for my job, or
Yeah.
my travel show stopped. Like there was just so much going on. And a lot of my worry was for my mother and aged care and family and friends. And there was so much going on. It's a little bit too much, but you're right. My brain felt like it was trying to make decisions or figure this out, or it was just like, whoa, there was so much going on. So I'm sure everyone who's tuning in could really resonate with that,
Yeah.
that processing. When you talk about unwanted habits, so another thing I've discovered by talking to a lot of people during the pandemic is they might feel either a little bit down and depressed or anxious. So they might be choosing to drink alcohol, like binge drinking to try and fix things, emotional eating, just things that they probably normally wouldn't gravitate to, but they're just trying to use it as a way to cope, or
Yeah.
maybe to numb down feelings.
Yeah. I think for sure it's, it sounds very counterintuitive, but in a way, when we're feeling all the anxiety and worry and all the feelings of things, and we reach for something like food or alcohol or whatever, in a weird way, that's kind of a sign of our mental health. I see it as us saying like, "Whoa, this feeling isn't me. Like, and the feeling looks real. It feels dangerous. We're believing all the stories our mind is telling. It feels so personal and real, and yet we know it's not us, that we will just grab anything we can to kind of numb it, to get back home, get back to who we really are. So in a sense, it's these habits create issues for us for sure. But I think it's so cool to see that they're kind of rooted in mental health. They're rooted in us knowing, whoa, this doesn't feel like home and I want to get back home.
Wow. And so if we're overthinking, what is a technique we could do to help the overthinking? Or what are some self-care rituals we could try to sort of get out of that overthinking, excessive worrying mind where we're just so caught up?
I think the biggest thing that by far the most helpful thing we can do is to really just come to understand how our mind overthinks like that. Like, just to see that we aren't our mind, you know, our mind is not responding to true problems in life. So even during the pandemic, even when, yes, there are things happening out in the world, when we're sitting at home and we're safe and everything's okay and our mind is going nuts about all the things that might happen, it is so easy for us to get caught up and say, no, look, there's a pandemic out there. But it's not because there's a pandemic out there. It's really not. Our mind, even with the pandemic out there are moments when our mind is just quiet. There are moments when our mind is all over the place, being hopeful about it, feeling really terrified, feeling a little bit terrified. So it's so huge to see a mind. That's why I use this when I teach a lot. Like our mind is kind of like, just, it gets wound up and it just talks about anything and everything it can see. And it's important to kind of see, okay, my mind will do this. Everybody's mind will, but we aren't our mind. So even while our mind is out there worrying and telling us all the what ifs, and even when stuff's happening in the world, we're still at peace because we are not our mind. We are the peace beyond our mind. I think seeing more about that in a really deep way that's meaningful for us is by far the most helpful thing anyone can ever learn, because then our mind can go off and do whatever it does, talk about whatever it talks about, but we have a different perspective of it. We kind of come to see, oh, that's just my mind worrying. That's just my mind being anxious. We don't need to manage it or change it or anything. It'll change on its own. But when we aren't afraid of it, we have a different relationship with it. It changes everything.
Wow, that was incredible how you explained that, because I feel that often when we have thoughts, we think that's us.
Yes.
We think that's me talking to me.
Yeah.
Whether that be a bad message or whether that be an instruction or whatever. And so I love how you talked about we should feel like our thoughts, that's our mind. But we're separate, like we step it back from that.
Yes.
So we can be the observer of those thoughts and understand that's like our mind is. How many thoughts do we have in a day?
A lot.
Because I read this. I read a lot of books, and I want to ask you this because you've written so many books where they say like 70,000 thoughts, and it's negative based. Like our mind, they're saying, is based. It wants to be automatically negative.
Yeah. Well, it's
bizarre.
It's trying to, I know it sounds but it's trying to protect us. So like, if you think about, how the brain, even just the human brain, evolved, our brain hasn't changed that much since the earliest humans, which lived 200,000 years ago. So back in those days, it saved our lives for our brain to be negative, because there were actual threats to our survival around every corner. There was a woolly mammoth that was going to eat you, or you were about to run out of food like today, or a tribe was going to come kill you and take all your food. Like, these were real things that early humans faced. So our brain had to be hyper vigilant for anything that might go wrong. It had to know, oh, there was a rustle in the bushes. This might be something about to eat me. I better go on the attack. When we got that right as humans, we lived. So our brain evolved to be super hyper vigilant in that way. Now today, almost none of us have any real threats around any corners. Like it just doesn't happen, thankfully, if we're lucky, that's not really happening in most of our lives. So, but our brain doesn't know that. We give our brain's amazing, but it's a machine. It doesn't really have a lot of common sense. It kind of just works in a mechanical way. It says, "Hey, I have to keep this person alive. Here's what I do. I predict what might go wrong." And so that's still our brain's best trick for keeping us alive, is predicting what might go wrong, which makes it kind of negatively slanted, and it sacrifices accuracy. It's predicting the future. I mean, how accurate can that be? It's just a guess. But see, if we know that, we kind of correct for it. Like if we know, oh, my mind's always telling me that these people are better than me, or I'm not good enough, or these bad things might happen, you kind of come to know, oh, that's just what a brain does. It's just what a mind does. And you're far less impacted by it. It's when we don't know how it goes that we take it very personally.
Wow. So when we're having those thoughts, we can just recognize it's actually the brain. That's what the brain does.
Yeah.
It's not us with, low self-esteem or whatever it might be. It's just the way the brain is. Can we then kind of come over that thought to say, like, take a moment to say, no, like counteract? If we're thinking, I'm not worthy, can we take a step back and then think, hang on a minute, that's just my brain? Like in a car, I can now go left and say I am worthy.
Yeah, I don't know if like I almost think we don't even have to take that extra step of saying I am worthy and all of that. It's To me, it's more of like we notice a feeling. We notice the feeling of I'm not worthy. Sometimes we notice the words in the story, but usually we just feel bad or we just have a wave of shame, or we notice ourselves not wanting to go out there in the world, or whatever that feels like. And I think that's sort of the shortcut, is we come to know that whenever we feel heavy or restricted or tight, or like we want to hide or anything other than loving, that our mind is told a story. That's sort of the shortcut. So yes, we can recognize usually by our feelings that we're kind of in our mind's stories, in the negativity, and see, oh, okay. And that way we don't have to even correct it. We don't have to even know what our mind is saying exactly, because often we don't. We just, like, the way it looks for me is I just feel kind of heavy or down. And I'm like, oh, I have a lot on my mind. Like my mind's running away. But again, I'm not my mind. So I don't, that's fine. It's just off talking about stuff. It doesn't feel good, but I don't have to worry about that. It's going to settle down.
Oh, wow. And can lots of people recommend to do journaling, to get your thoughts out on paper, to sort of get your thoughts from up here in your mind thinking? Is that a good thing if it's just the mind, like, doing what it does? Can journaling help to clear our mind?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it's such a personal thing, because kind of like you're alluding to, uh, most of the time when my mind is racing, the last thing I want to do is journal and go into all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's easier to just kind of be like, I know my mind, it's like this is all wound up. I know my mind's just off chatting. I'm just going to let it do its thing and I'm going to go live my life. I don't want to sit and journal. Now, other times it might feel helpful. So I think, like any of these practices, it's not a one size fits all thing. We all are going to get little nudges from our own common sense, our own wisdom about what feels right. And we can just do it if it feels right to us.
Yeah, okay. We can do it if it feels right for us. And there's been so much traction on meditation, how meditation can help us become the observer, can help us kind of get distracted and then bring our attention back onto our breath. Can that help create space, or help that overactive, excessive thinking brain if it's just always it never shuts up?
Yeah. I don't know that it is going to stop your brain from talking, but I don't think anything's going to do that. But I do think it can help you kind of feel into the space beyond all your thinking, to play with that, where you're watching it, noticing it. Anytime you're not, you can see your experience, you're not it, you're something else. And so I think that's what's so valuable. I've never had like a formal meditation practice. It just hasn't been the thing for me. But I can tell you that by exploring all of this, seeing how our mind works, knowing that I'm not my mind, I live in a more meditative space. I notice my thinking, it pops out rather than being so in it, So there's all kinds of ways to do it. Meditation is just kind of one practice.
Wow, I think you just sort of alluded to something there when you talked about meditation and things. Like, you've obviously individually, we have to work out what works best for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're so right. I've met people who sitting down for them isn't available or a possibility just due to their lifestyle. And other people aren't interested in sitting down and being quiet and, listening to their breath. So finding how to create space is an individual thing, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's not really about the technique anyway, right? It's just about what that maybe opens us up to. So it kind of doesn't matter what path you take. What matters is what is being curious about what's there beyond all this experience.
Yeah. And I think if there was a listener out there and their mind's telling them, you're a loser, you're a failure because they've just lost their job or a business, no one loves you, all of these really harmful messages. What's really reassuring today, meeting with you, Dr. Amy Johnson, and for our audience, is that's not you. That's just your brain. That's like your mind. And there's so much more to you than that.
Yeah.
And that's not you. Whereas I feel we can get so caught up in your thinking, oh, that's me saying that to me. That's who I am.
100%. You're 100% right. And it's, how could it possibly be us? How could it possibly be true? So even and I know this is tough because when you just lost your job or someone just rejected you on something or whatever, like, of course, our mind will find all the evidence and say, well, here's how it's true. Everyone hates you. Or, like, our mind will find all the evidence. But again, that's just what a mind does. It's just a computer looking for evidence for what it believes. There's no way it could actually be the truth that any of us are a loser or that life is going to go bad for us. Like, how can we know the future? Like, all of this is made up. And we're so conditioned to believe what we think, like you said, that we just get lost in it. When you hold it up to common sense, kind of like you're doing right now, and you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, how can this be true? How can it be us? But we don't ever do that for the most part. Your audience might a little bit, but like, really, most human beings, we just live in the sea of thought and we believe everything we feel. And that's the end of it. So it's awesome that we're having this opportunity to just even turn around and look at it, because it starts to open up so much.
And that's what I love about your school, because when I went to school, I didn't learn this.
No.
I did not learn this at school. I mean, this could be the 101 at school. And that's why I love your school, because I feel if I learned that at primary school or high school, that could really help my mental health or anyone's mental health, understanding that. Now, can we talk a little bit about your school? Because you opened that in 2017 and it's an online school. And we can't learn this at school. So you have created this incredible school. What inspired you to create this online school?
I saw from my own experience and from working with so many people one-on-one that everybody's basically the same. and we don't feel the same. We all feel like we're special and we're different and we're worse off than everyone else, because we live, again, our focus is on me and my thoughts and my feelings and all that. But it's a crazy thing. And you probably have a sense of this after just having these kind of conversations, but having therapy sessions and coaching sessions with person after person after person, I started to see, wow, the details are different, but what's beneath it is exactly the same in all these people. We all have a mind that tells us basically the same stuff, just with our own version of the details put in. You worried about your mom during COVID, someone else worried about something else, but both were human beings full of health who had minds that were off worrying and telling stories, and that's what matters. So I really wanted to be able to have a community come together and see, wow, we are all the same. And that was really the inspiration. And that's what we do. We have people with so many different anxieties, worries, habits, all kinds of depression, mood stuff, all kinds of things. And we go a little bit beneath the story and the details, and we look at, wow, your mind works just like your mind, just like his mind, just like her mind. There's people from 48 countries that have been through the school. It doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what religion you are, none of it matters. What matters is you're a human being. We all work the same. And that brings so much insight and so much like freedom to people, because all this stuff isn't about us.
That is so amazing. That is finding freedom from anxiety and habits. And you just touched on how many countries and people that you've been working with right around the world. And it's so true. They have the same brain mind processing, as you call it, computer, as such. So, and you're so right. When I was worrying about my mum and aged care and COVID getting into aged care, so many people I was seeing on social media were worried about the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I was no different. And you were so right. We kind of live in a me-centric world.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's really, we really aren't that unique in terms of how the brain works or the mind works. It's sort of like you said. Now, you have written also so many books. Like, what inspired you to write The Little Book of Big Change? How did that idea come up, or what inspired you to write it?
So I was in a binge eating bulimia habit for about 8 years. I had tried everything possible to break that habit, and nothing had helped until I came across what I share now, like this understanding. So I deeply personally for myself began to see that I am actually healthy. I have nothing to fix. I just have a mind that talks about binging and purging all the time. And I thought I was my mind. So I listened to it. I mean, this is the short version, but that's the essence of it. I believed everything I thought. When my mind and then my body had all this horrible feeling, and my mind said, go eat or go get rid of the food or whatever, I didn't know a way to feel better without just listening to what my mind said. But when I came across this understanding and started to see I'm not my mind, I'm actually healthy. I just have a computer up here that's on a setting that, has been reinforced for doing that. Everything changed. My habit of 8 years went away very, very quickly, completely free of it now for about 12 years. So anyway, that was obviously huge in my life. And that's what inspired the book. And I could see, again, that it wasn't about bulimia. It was about any habit or any worry, because they're all the same.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. So you just understood, because sometimes our mind will give us like an action to do.
Yeah.
And not necessarily an action that's best for us. But you're so right, but we think that's us directing us, do this, do that, do this, do that. And you're right, we get so caught up and we think that's who we are. How did you though break that pattern or action? Did you have to go, hang on a minute, I'm taking control here, I'm not listening to your direction, I'm not going to do it? Like, did you have to sort of take a step back and go, I'm not going to carry out that direction or action?
Sort of, but it wasn't action focused. It was more that I just truly saw what was going on in my head. And then it didn't make sense to carry out the action. Does that make sense? So when I really saw, wow, my brain only yells at me to do my habit because it's been doing that for a while and I've been listening. So that means I've been reinforcing it and feeding it and keeping that
Oh,
conditioning going. That's the only reason my mind was telling me to binge and purge. So the more I saw that, I just saw, wow, there's nothing in this for me. I don't have to listen to it. It doesn't do anything helpful for me. Now, I mean, I'm just putting words around it now, but
yes.
I saw
Yeah.
that in a very insightful way, and it just lost its power. So there were still times when I kind of started to follow through or did follow through a little bit. And sometimes in those moments, yeah, it was kind of like, wait a minute, that's right. This doesn't make sense anymore. It was a little more of an active thing, but mostly that's why I say in the book, it happened by insight. It wasn't about let me do this behavior differently or let me step in and it wasn't action focused. The action was a consequence of it totally just looking different.
Wow. Okay. So, like, if someone was out there and say their habit is biting their nails and they
Mhm.
do it because they're stressed,
Yeah.
and their mind might say, bite your nails,
Yeah.
or they might automatically not really have it just automatically happens. Just having insight to what's going on and becoming aware of the habit is the first step.
Yeah, and it's not even specifically about the habit necessarily. So in that example, biting your nails is something people they don't think about it at all, right? They feel
Yeah.
stressed, like you said, and before they know it, they're doing it. But when we explore who we really are and how our mind works, our mind tends to kind of fall to the background. So the stress that was driving that habit to begin with starts to go away. That makes sense? So there's nothing to cope with, there's nothing to comfort themselves from because they still think and they still feel, but it just doesn't look and feel the same way as it used to. Stress used to feel like I'd put on a helmet and it was like here, right? It's like all in your face and like it's so close and it's so true. As we explore how thought works, it's more like it's over here. It's like this thing again, this thing's still talking, but now it's kind of off in the distance a little bit. And so there's just nothing to cope with in the same way.
Oh, wow. This is so interesting what you're sharing. Incredibly interesting. And then, so you've written so many books, but how do you take care of yourself? Like, what are some of your self-care rituals?
Yeah, it's so funny because I used to be the kind of person that was in the name of self-care, I was kind of hard on myself. Like I would try to meditate, never worked that well for me. I would like, get myself to like eat this way and do this and I thought I was doing it because that's the healthy and right thing to do. But what I really kind of saw was like, wow, there's pressure on it. That's almost kind of me forcing myself into something because someone else said it's the thing to do, but it didn't necessarily feel right for me. So nowadays, what feels so freeing and like so much like self love is to just kind of do what I want to do, which often means like not having the perfect diet, not having the perfect schedule, like letting myself stay up late and watch Netflix when that feels right, letting myself sleep in when that feels right. And I know that's kind of opposite of what we're used to thinking about for self care. But again, for someone who was like a type A perfectionist, hard on herself, this is like bliss. It's amazing. So I do exercise almost every day. I feel so good and I've been a regular exerciser for a long time. But a lot of my other self-care things are like, well, go ahead and have that glass of wine every once in a while. It's not going to kill you. Go ahead and stay up late, and that I still get like a little kid like, "Ooh, can I really do that?" But it feels great.
Yeah, I love how you because I was expecting you to say, all right,
Right.
I get up 2 hours before and I gotta do this and this and this and this, like you're so structured. But I love how you are giving yourself permission to feel in and do what's best for you. I do the same. If my body or I need to have a sleep in, I'll do that. My younger self would have, I would have beaten myself up and went, oh no, you got to be up at, 7 a.m. and you should have had your walk done and
Yeah.
this done and that done and da 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 da. But sometimes it's nice to sort of take the the foot off the pedal, isn't it? And to tune in with what you need and what feels right.
Yeah. It's funny. Before our lockdowns, I used to do yoga at a yoga studio every day. And I did that for every day for like, I mean, I would take some days off, but pretty much every day for like 5 or 6 years. And last March, I quit going. I mean, they shut down for a while. Now I think they're open, but it just doesn't feel right for me to go. So I haven't gone there in a year. But I used to go, and they used to do these 30-day challenges a couple times a year. They'd be like, you come every day for 30 days, and it would be this great thing to bring the community together and to really kind of push you, to challenge you. Now, for me, and the way my mind used to work, in the way you were saying, 30-day challenge, I would have done 32 days. I would have been all over that. I would have gone twice a day. Like so there was no challenge in that. I'm like, oh, that's easy. I can follow rules and be really hard on myself. So what I would do is I would challenge myself to not do the 30-day challenge. This is so crazy. But I'd see all my classmates, checking their days, and that would get my mind like, oh, I should do that. But I would go like 28 days or 27 and like not be perfect. And that was such a challenge for me, but it was so cool because I could just see my mind being like, oh, you're not being perfect, and be like, okay, mind, whatever. 30 days is arbitrary. I don't need it. And it was awesome. So
I love those tips. I love that because you're kind of like, you're definitely separating from your mind and you're figuring out, no. Like, come on, mind. Like I often listen to another motivational speaker, David Goggins, and he talks about that mind, chattering, nattering, and like, no, I don't want to go for a workout today. And he's like, we're doing it. I'm going.
Yeah.
And it's like, he just like, he kind of plays with that. Whereas like so many of us would buy into, I don't feel like exercising today. Okay, as Roger that, I'm not exercising, because I listen to the mind, thinking that's me telling me, but it's not. And it's so liberating that you're explaining how we're sort of like, we don't have to like buy into that thought, or that's not us. Yeah, incredible. So lockdown and the global pandemic, obviously before you used to do so much travel and you were speaking like a professional speaker. So everything obviously has gone online at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, how did the global pandemic change your life? Just from a personal perspective as well.
Yeah. It's I feel so blessed to be able to have these kinds of outlets, that it did change a lot, but professionally in a lot of ways it didn't, which I'm so grateful for. Like, that we could just pivot and it's like, we couldn't meet in a ballroom, but hey, we can still meet on Zoom. So I can't complain at all. I'm so grateful to have the ability to work this way. And most of my work is virtual, so it's great. Personally, it was, I think like a lot of people, there's just been kind of ups and downs with it. Initially, it was I have a 9 and 11-year-old who were super busy and lots of activities. All their stuff got canceled, right away. And we had such great time together, and we still do. They're starting to pick up some activities now a little more, but I was so grateful for it last spring, thinking there would be no other circumstance under which my 2 kids would want to sit and just play games with their parents all night, because there's nowhere to go, and so I think I feel really lucky. And then of course, like everyone, we've had our moments and we're like, get me out of this house. And, and I'm sad about things we had to cancel, and they've missed out on a lot, but it's just been a great time to kind of see our resilience. And also to see that, happiness doesn't come from what we're doing. And I think that's huge for everyone. Peace of mind doesn't come from what we're doing. We can not know what's going on. We can be worried about family members, anything, and we can still feel peace within us, even while those worries are floating around. This last year has been a huge opportunity for us all to see that, I think.
Yeah, wow, because you're so right. We had so much incredible one-on-one time with our family. It really sort of reconnected us, because prior to the pandemic, I know most young kids were on their mobile phone, and talking to their parents was a bit of a non-event. It's like, I'm on Snapchat over here, mum. Or, and even some cases, the mum was like, I'm busy, and looking at the mobile phone, because I would see this all the time at the coffee shops. But obviously, like, it just really, it just like, it was like the universe or Mother Earth just flipped the switch and said, hey, guys, you got to get back to being a family unit. Because when I grew up, I'm so blessed that I got to sit at a table and talk to my mum or talk to my brother or talk to my family and connect. And, like Friday nights, I would go to my family friends, the girl I went to primary school with, and they'd have the records on and we'd be dancing and we connected. And it was so one-on-one. So I feel that that's really, connection's been huge, hasn't it? Been a really big thing. Keep connected. Connected has like been this message, hasn't it, throughout the pandemic?
Yes. And I think a lot of people, as things change, I hope will continue to just think about that, not just go back into life how it was. I know we definitely are, now that more things are opening up. We're making different choices about how important is this activity, because it's fun, but it's also busy and it keeps us apart and it's a lot of running around. And is it really as important as we thought it was? It is, like you said. I love how you said that. In many levels, it's a refresh. Mother Earth, I mean, nature got to refresh, families got to refresh. I think it's good.
Yeah, I always feel that the universe or the Mother Earth, or there's just this greater, higher level force, whatever religion you believe in. But I just believe it was a bit like, hey, everybody, you're too fast.
Yeah.
You're spending more time on this Instagram app than actually connecting with the people in your house. And you're disconnected from each other, and this has got to stop. So I do really hope that when we all get back to traveling international, state to state, country to country, that we still keep these strong values of family connection, community connection, the love and care, the empathy has been incredible and really reassuring. But now tell me, you've had to homeschool. Because I'm seeing so many mums around the world going, I'm now, running my business. I'm now homeschooling. And so many women have been incredible, and fathers, should I say, or carers, saying, I have nothing, I don't know anything about homeschooling. However, I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's definitely had its challenges. And again, I think the biggest thing, though, has been and first, I should just say my husband does the majority of the homeschooling. So again, I'm super blessed, have very fortunate compared to a lot of people. But it's been this opportunity to kind of, again, look at what's really important. So like I see my kids, it's very easy the way ours was set up for them to kind of skip assignments. Like their teachers are assigning stuff online, but there's not a lot of, they're not together. So it's easy for the kid to be like, oh, I did that, or what, like I could look at that and want to like make sure, like, do everything and let's get through the whole list and you have to do everything that was assigned. And there have been moments of that, but more often than not, it's sort of been like, school's important, education's important, but our well-being is way more important. And here in a moment, I don't know that it's best for you to go do an assignment online versus to take a break or to sit and be with your family. Again, we can get so in the rules of what's the right thing to do, but when you kind of dip down beneath the rules and you're looking at your kid or we're looking at ourselves, it's like, hey, this is what feels right now. So it's been a time to kind of navigate that, not worry so much that the kids are probably not learning as much as they normally would. Just saying, hey, if they're healthy and they're happy, that's what matters, and the rest will catch up.
I love this. So you're taking a really kind of relaxed approach, like you're getting it done. Yeah. And we can apply this to our own life, can't we? Because I've spoken to many people in lockdown, and they have found that if they take the structure, the pressure off at like 8 o'clock, I've got to do this. 9 o'clock, we need to do this. 11 o'clock, this has to happen. Yeah. By 4, this. Many people have opened up and said when they take that routine or that regimen, it takes a lot of the stress away.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the world kind of going a little bit crazy has helped us do that because we've seen, whoa, I can't follow my schedule or my plans the way I thought I could. And yeah, it's so great to just be able to be flexible and see that we just get little nudges in the moment about what feels right. We don't have to live life by a calendar, by a set of rules. Like we can do that in some ways, you might have a plan for some things, obviously, but really life is lived moment to moment. And we have this guidance that just kind of moves us through it perfectly.
Yeah, I love this. Life is lived moment to moment. And you're so right. You might see, like, as an example, I went for a walk the other morning. We're so blessed to be in Australia and it's sunshine and it's 30 degrees. I know that you've got snow outside.
Cold here. It's not even
Yeah.
30 Fahrenheit here.
And like I saw the sweetest, cutest dog. It was so happy, this little dog, that it just lit up my world and made me feel joyous and happy. And I wanted to hug this little dog and take it home. But it's like that moment, which wasn't planned for, it just happened. And it was in that moment I felt the happiest, even in a global pandemic and even with all the stress going on. So it truly is moment to moment, isn't it?
That's that's it exactly. It's that simple and that profound that you felt that peace no matter what was happening in the world. You
Mm.
weren't thinking about that stuff. You were just here in the moment. And here in the moment, there's always peace and there's always stuff to appreciate and it's stuff that we get excited to see. It's just when we go up into our heads and we're thinking about what might happen that things get stressful.
Yeah, wow. I could talk to you all day about what you do, what you know. It's just absolutely incredible. You've really given myself and I'm for all of the podcast listeners great insight. And to know that we are not our thought, and this is just our, as you say, chatter, 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 chatter. It's just what the brain does, what the mind does is really liberating. So even if someone right now is feeling really excessive thoughts, boom, 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 you're a failure, you don't have a job, blah, 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 this is going to happen, you're going to lose your house. I often say to someone, if you could spend some time, if you're going to think, could we just spend some time at least thinking about what we want?
Yeah.
Like, is that a better option? Because in my experience, if I think about what I don't want, it generally happens, because I've really ruminated and I've really this story, I'm latching onto it.
Right.
And I just seem to attract it or it all happens. But I kind of I'm a bit like you now. I've learned to kind of park it. So I kind of I'm in the back seat of my car. And I know this mind's up here trying to but I'm in the back seat and I'm a bit I'm going to yell at you and go left or, I am kind of becoming more self-aware.
Yeah. That's great. That's wonderful. And yes, and like you said, we have those moments where sometimes it feels like we have a choice, where it's like sometimes your mind's just yelling and you just like, whatever, I'm not listening to you. Other times it's like, hey, let's talk about something else. I'm sick of thinking about what let's talk about what we like or what's good. So, I mean, it's so cool. It's the whole human experience is such a mystery in a way, but it's just so fascinating to see how is it that we have this huge, vivid, emotional experience that moves through us, and to just be in the mystery of it and play with it and experiment with it is so helpful.
I love how you play with your mind. Like that whole yoga challenge, and your mind's like, no, we're going to do the 32 days, 30 days. And you're like, no, we're not. And that's kind of going to be fun for people. And if someone's having excessive thoughts, say they're right now, can they break that excessive thought by doing something else, whether it be listening to music, I don't know, going for a drive? Well, probably you can't drive if you're in lockdown, but, breaking it instead, if they can really feel like it's just tormenting them And like some people have expressed that sometimes it's like the only time they get a break from their mind is when they're asleep. It just won't shut up.
Yeah.
I know what that feels like. I'm an over talker. I'm a talker by nature, so it's even worse when you're a talker. But I have found in my experience, if I do something different, it just sort of like it distracts. The mind's got to now process something else or do something else or focus on something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can help. And again, I think what it comes down to is doing what feels right for you in the moment, because it's also true that our mind can't, even though it's always going, it takes breaks and it changes subjects. Like people will say like, oh, I've been thinking about this one problem all day long. Well, we haven't really. We've been distracted and then we bring it back, then something else grabs your attention, then your mind brings it back. So our mind is designed to settle down. It truly is. It's designed to kind of just support us, not be the lead character. So when we just see more about how that works, that it tends to even out. But in the meantime, when there are things that occur to you to do, like, oh, I'm going to go outside or whatever, call a friend, think about something else, do it. We also have so much common sense that we're designed with. So our own common sense will give us ideas that are perfect for us in the moment. It doesn't mean they're always rules that will always work, but they'll be perfect for us in that particular moment.
I love that. And before we say goodbye, I've got one more question to ask you, because this comes up, creating a habit. So if someone was out there and they think to themselves, right, I want to go walking, I want to get fit, I want to feel better. And then they go, right, does it take 21 days to create a habit, 29 days? Is it 32 days? Is it 3 months? Is it a year? How can they show up? They've made a decision. They know how they want to exercise. The question is, how long will it take them to do a habit and to become a ritual?
I have no idea. And I think it's probably different for everyone, and I don't think it matters. Now, what I would say is just do what you want to do. Just do what feels good. If we're doing what feels good, we're going to be drawn to more of that and then drawn to more of that. But if we're trying hard to like start a healthy habit, it's not going to feel so good. It's going to feel like, oh, I got to show up and do it again. It's not going to catch as easily. So it's like when people say, for example, like, yeah, I've been trying to work out, but I can't get it to stick. I'm running 5 miles every day and I hate running. It's like, well, then what do you like? Tennis? Go play tennis. Like that'll become a habit. If you genuinely like it, it'll become a habit. So we don't have to kind of manipulate it so much. I think just do what you enjoy doing. And there's no way, everything we enjoy doing does become pretty natural for us. It is already.
Yeah, I love those advice. Do what you love, because that's what I found with exercise. Once I discovered I loved walking in nature and being, immersed and connected to Mother Earth, I just want to do it. Like, yeah. I don't even have to think about it. But then there are days when I feel really depleted, really exhausted, and I tune in and go, okay, I'm not feeling it today. But then the next day I'll wake up, I'm like, oh, I just want to go walking, and the body and the mind, and it just feels right. But like, as an example, I can't swim. Now, if I was trying to swim, I'd hate it, I'm not the best swimmer. So I do love how you said, just figure out what you love and then do that. And then you'll want to do it. So it will become a habit and a ritual and just part of your life.
Yeah. People act like habits are so hard, but we have so many habits. Are you kidding me? Like we have millions, like we all are in the habit of brushing our teeth at least once, probably twice a day. Like we all have the habit of eating meal, like we have so many habits that we don't consider habits. We just focus on the ones that are like, I want to save money or keep my house clean or exercise more. And, and the only reason those feel so hard is because we don't enjoy that stuff and we're pushing and forcing it. So when we go with what we like, habits naturally kind of just pick up and take on a life of their own.
I love that when we, pick up and take a life of their own. You're so right. We're putting so much stress and pressure on ourselves. Like, I got to create a exercise habit. Holy, whoa, guacamole, like pressure, 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 pressure. And yet if we just be like, I'm just going to go, do what feels good, do what feels right, then it's less stress.
Yeah, and it's better for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love everything you share and do. And I can't wait to have you on the show again. I have no doubt you're going to write many, many more books for years to come to help everyone. So obviously everyone can go to DrAmyJohnson.com to sign up and connect with you. Where else can we stay connected with you?
That's really the best place because you'll find there links to, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all the stuff. And you'll find links to my podcast. So I have a weekly podcast, which is a great place to see more about this understanding. You'll find links to the Little School of Big Change that you mentioned. So that's really the hub. Everything else lives there.
Yeah, I love your podcast show and your book and your online school. I kid you not, every school in Australia or the world should take on your module, your school, because this is what we need to learn as kids. We're only learning it as adults.
Yeah.
But it's better to learn now. So once again, Dr. Amy Johnson, thank you so much for joining us on the Spirit Girl podcast show. You're incredible how you learnt from your own habits, like learnt from your own experience with the whole bulimia, the food, the binging, that has now allowed you to just help so many other people globally, right around the world. And what you've shared today is so valuable. It's going to help so many people who are tuning in. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for helping us work out what this brain and mind does. Like,
Yeah.
it's so liberating to know that if the mind's, like you say, it's chatter, 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 loser, 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 whatever, whatever, whatever. So, woo, time out, buddy, time out. Like, push that aside. Like, I love it. I love it. So thank you again for all that you do, all that you are. You're incredible, incredible, incredible. And you're so needed in this time, in this generation, and for generations to come. So thank you again. I'm super grateful to share you with the Spirit Girl audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. And it's great to talk with you.
Thank you. So we'll say goodbye to Dr. Amy Johnson, our Spirit Girl podcast guest for today. Be sure to grab a copy of her book, head to DrAmyJohnson.com and hang out with her on her Changeable podcast show each week also to learn even more. And together, let's feel good from within. I'd love you to subscribe to the Spirit Girl podcast show, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love too. Bye for now.